Okay, so in this video, we're going to discuss the Form Builder. The Form Builder is a feature which enables administrators to create custom tabs on the candidate's company and contact record. These forms are then assigned to different user groups, which then enable those users to see those specific tabs when they access the record. An obvious example of this is the candidate record, where for many users, when they're accessing a candidate, they might only be interested in a summary of key details about that candidate record, whereas our standard candidate form will list all candidate details about the record on the landing page. You might also have a situation where you have members of back office that require different information when they're accessing the candidate record. And again, you could set up a tab that's specific to the back office user group where they see that information when they're landing on the candidate record. So we'll start within the admin area, and ultimately the first thing we need to do is enable our access to the form builder. This is done within the user group permissions section. So if you go to user group permissions, and then under your designated user group, we type in custom forms. It's this option here, edit custom forms. So you need to ensure that's set to full access. And if that's set to full access, what you'll find is on the system row, this option here called Form Builder. So you'll be able to click on Form Builder, and what it will do by default is load the custom forms that are available against your user group. So in this case, the custom form that I've set up on the candidate record is the first form that it's showing there when I land on that custom form. So we'll start by going through the toolbar just to explain some of the options that are available here. Obviously, the go back to admin option will take you back to the admin page. This is also one of the areas of the system where you need to save changes that you've made to write back to the form. So if you are making changes and then you just choose to go back to the admin, those changes don't write back. So save form is quite an important component just to bear in mind with that. But if you load form, obviously, as I said, it will load the custom forms against your user group as part of landing. But if I go to say the load form option here, you have the option of selecting the user group, then the entity type, whether that be candidate, company, and contact. So if I select company as the example here and hit load, because I don't have any custom forms set up against the company record, obviously it's loaded blank there, and then I could start by then creating a new tab if I wanted to. But if I go back to loading the candidate form there, you can see obviously that's been loaded. Add new tab obviously does what it says ultimately. With tabs that have been added to the custom forms, you can adjust the name of them just by clicking onto the tab label. But if we select to add new tab, you'll see here that you enter in the tab name. So I'll just call this example. You also then can specify the number of columns of the tab. The standard column setup is a sort of 2-column structure with a form. On this one, I actually set it up with 3 columns, and you can also obviously have it just set up with 1 column. But I'll select 2 there, and then columns scroll independently is an option if you want. I'll leave that as no. But if I hit OK there, that will create our new tab. Again, just moving through the toolbar. Copy form to other user groups is what you'd do at the end of all of this. Effectively, once you've created a custom form that you've then tested, that you're happy with, ultimately the next step will be to copy that custom form to whatever user groups that are relevant to access that custom form. So that might be everybody, or that might be just a select number of specific user groups that obviously need that custom form. So you would select those custom forms there, hit copy, and then it would create a copy of that form and put it against that user group. Save form, as I say, you hit save where you need to obviously record back changes. Existing records and creating records, I will probably come back to, and field options I'll probably come back to, but just to explain in summary, you'll have fields and sections which are only really relevant to an existing record, to when you're going into an actual record that's been created. Whereas creating records is slightly different in that that's when you're going into that new create new candidate form or create new company form. How does it look in that scenario? So yeah, obviously in the existing candidate record, the address as an example can't appear in this way when you're creating a new record. That's only an existing record option for it to appear as it does. And it might be that you have certain fields that should only appear when they're being created, or only appear when they're existing records. So it's allowed that differentiator between an existing record and a created record. And you have a section within the page element where you can specify whether it's a creation only section or an existing only section, and that just allows you to sort of group the fields in that way if you want to. But a lot of the time it's obviously just existing records, and that's just set up that way. And show field options, ultimately with several of the widgets. If you hit show field options, they'll show the different field options that are available about that specific widget, and that could be to do with the sizing of the widget, to do with the content of the widget, and some of the features. Effectively, you can obviously set those features and then hide the field options to restore it back to appearing sort of closer to how it will appear, obviously, when it's actually live. And again, you hit save form when it's ready to be written back. So as things currently stand, we've got an example form there. If I was just to hit refresh on this candidate record, you can see now that there's an example column that's been added there, but there's obviously no field information that's available in here. So what we'll do is we'll go back to our custom form, and now we'll look at adding some fields to our example tab. Okay, so we'll start by looking at some of the options that are available when you select add new field. So based on the number of columns that you've defined against your custom form, you'll have an add new field as the last option under each column. So at the moment, obviously there's no fields, so it just says add new field on both sides. So we'll hit add new field there, and then we've got the different options, the different types of data that we can add to our tab. Starting with page elements. So header is literally just to put a banner across the top. So this is an example header, candidate details, I'll say, and that will just put a banner across the top of that record. The next one along is collapsible section, and then you've got collapsible section open by default. So collapsible section is effectively that it's example collapsible. It's probably section. You would call out whatever is appropriate to call that. But if we click on that arrow there, so then we add a field to this area, and we'll add in maybe someone's email address, mobile number. In fact, we'll call this contact information, and then we'll say we'll add another one in there for telephone number, let's say. And then if I was to save this form, we'll go back to here, refresh that, go to example. What you can see there is we've got those two options here, and then under contact information you can see there it's a collapsible form, so it will appear or not appear. So obviously that's very useful for saving space, and ultimately it's for that purpose really. If you've got a section where you want to click on it and then it load the form detail and then hide it, then obviously you can do that. And again, if you were to use the option where you're saying open by default, then when you're loading it, it would load with that being opened in that way. So you have the option to hide it if you wanted to, but it'll be open by default. Next one along would be the creation only and existing only sections, which we mentioned as part of going through the toolbar, on the form builder. So if you create a creation only section or an existing only section, essentially all of the fields that go within that area will then essentially only appear on the create new form. Likewise, if you create an existing only section, all the fields that go in that area will only exist in that existing record scenario, not a create new form area. Divider literally just puts a space into the screen, so it's to be used basically to separate out fields. I used the divider, for example, here when you've got you just want a bit of space between the fields, just to sort of group it out in a way. So it's to be used for that scenario really. So those are different page elements. Then we move into essentially the fields and the type of information that we can store against a record. Now for a candidate, associate records is going to be empty. There's no options in a candidate record for that way. But for a contact, the associated records would be contact records. For a company, it would also be contact records. It could also be the parent company as well. It's basically for fields that have an association with other records, like a cross-reference field, if you like. It's to be used for that scenario, but for a candidate, that's empty. String fields is all of the text-based fields that are available to choose from, and obviously they'll be listed within this area. Likewise, number fields will be all of the numbers that are in the field. So if I just add some string fields into here, so I'll add in surname and full name. Again, mobile number maybe. And also your custom fields will also be available within here. So again, it's using custom forms will allow you to add custom fields onto that landing page of a record as opposed to it being a separate tab. But let me just save that. Again, if I go to here, refresh. So you can see they've got contact information available in that hidden form, and then you've got this other information available just as part of the form template layout. Another divider there. Next one along will be the number fields. So if we choose some numeric fields, maybe you wanted salary, current salary. You can also drag and drop these fields around. So if you want to move that field up there, for example, and for fields that you don't want, if I added in a field that I suddenly decided I didn't want, I'd select that field, and then you've got delete field that's available there. So you hit delete, and obviously that's then removed. So that's numeric fields. Date fields, and look at those sort of fields. So you've got date of birth, date available, date created. Those fields are there. Date contacted, last document date. They're there, and then you've got lookup fields. And lookup fields are the drop-down fields that are available on the record. So your nationality is a lookup field, for example. Your status is a lookup field. Type is a lookup field. So ultimately, if you want any lookup fields being added, then you can do that there. If we put Canvas status there and Canvas source. And those are lookup fields. The next one along is widgets, and there are a select number of widgets. Widgets are essentially kind of grouped sections which have they're not as straightforward as them being just a field. There's things going on there that's part of them. They'll have field options associated to them. So for example, you've got a field widget for the address display. You've got a field widget for the image in social media. Just save that. Refresh out example there. So the address obviously comes through. You've got image and social media as well. That's that profile picture with the social media icons. Again, that will have a list of field options associated to it. Whether you're using don't show the image at all, just show the social media icons, or use the full image, or use half column. Show the social media icons, don't show them. There is as options to choose from. And then we've got other field options like the notes. So ultimately, if you've got different notes tab labels, you can put in the notes in here. And let's divide these up a little bit. They're probably a little bit bunched together at this point. Save there. Then I'll go out to here, hit refresh. And you can see now that there's, it's slowly starting to take shape. You've got obviously the notes section being included there, the profile picture, the address up there. Yeah, and obviously from a layout perspective, you'll have your own preferences in terms of design, in terms of how you want the information to appear. So you can obviously then decide whether or not you're going to drag and drop this around. That divided there. Other field options as well that you might have are things like, or the widgets that you have here are things like the current employer as a widget, and there's also another widget as well for the recent histories as well. So if you're interested in, from a recent histories perspective, a list of the last, say, 5 histories, 10 histories of maybe telephone calls or emails that have been received or sent. There'll be a list of histories perhaps that again is relevant that for you're interested in. So hit save there. And again, I'll hit refresh there. And you can see that these are histories that have been taken obviously from the history tab, that have been pulled through. The current employer obviously is being displayed as you'd expect. Field information is there. We've obviously got that tab or that collapsible column there. And from here on, it's about your own preference in terms of the fields that you want to see and the design you want to have, really. But ultimately, you've got a standard tab, which is how you see it. And that will obviously always be shipped with Colleague there, and then you'll have what clients will put in place per candidate or per entity record of candidate, company, contact, and so on in terms of specific field information that they want to see. If I delete off, maybe delete off that, save that. If you wanted to delete a tab, you would click on the cross. That obviously will remove the tab entirely, deleting it from view. But otherwise, you're again tailoring that tab, and then when you're ready to, you would copy that to the other user groups so they can see that information. And that's very much something that you need to be key about and understand, is that when you're making these changes, you're making that change to a custom form against the specified user group, and then you're copying those changes to those user groups. So if you wanted to, you could copy a custom tab to a load of user groups and then tweak it per user group slightly with extra fields or removing certain fields maybe. But the mindset is very much, if you've got the same tab that you're looking to put across multiple users, you've got to copy those user groups, or copy those tabs across those user groups before they're going to appear. But that's the form builder as it currently stands. Over time, we will introduce other widgets. There may be other field options, other page elements that are introduced. Again, it's largely based on feedback and what the demand is with regards to different form designs that clients might want to put in place. But it's there to be utilized. By all means, put them into effect, and any feedback, please let us know. Thank you.